Have you ever wondered just how far betrayal and jealousy can push a person? How a seemingly ordinary life can unravel into a brutal nightmare? What if a secret affair, carefully hidden in the shadows, suddenly explodes into a shocking public execution that leaves an entire community frozen in horror? This is not just another story, this is a descent into the darkest corners of the human heart, where love curdles into hatred, and desire transforms into deadly obsession. The kind of story that makes you double-check your locks at night and glance over your shoulder during the day. Today, we take you deep into the chilling details of a crime so shocking, so twisted that it shattered the lives of everyone involved and left an unforgettable stain on the pages of true crime history. A tale that begins with whispered secrets and forbidden rendezvous but ends in a cold-blooded execution that played out in broad daylight, witnessed by innocent bystanders who will never unsee what they saw. As we unravel the tangled web of deceit, heartbreak, and vengeance, you'll begin to question, how well do you really know the people closest to you? Could the person you trust most be hiding a deadly secret? Stay with us as we peel back the layers of this bone-chilling case, every lie told, every baleful plot hatched in the shadows, and every desperate move leading up to that final, fatal moment. But before we dive into the shocking twists and unbelievable truths, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for Crime Chronicles, your go-to channel for the most gripping, spine-tingling true crime stories. We uncover the truths that others are too afraid to tell, bringing you closer to the dark realities that lurk beneath the surface of everyday life. So, are you ready? Ready to witness how jealousy can drive someone to the brink, how a love affair can turn into a death sentence, and how betrayal can end in bloodshed? Then brace yourself because what you are about to hear will shake you to your core. This is Crime Chronicles, and this is a story you won't forget. Pastor Elijah Matthews was a man of faith, known far and wide for his soul-stirring sermons and commanding presence in the thriving Pentecostal church, Kingdom of Light Ministries. Every Sunday, his voice echoed through the grand sanctuary, instilling hope and conviction into the hearts of his devoted congregation. To them, he was more than a pastor, he was a spiritual father, a moral compass, and a symbol of divine strength. His elegant wife, Deborah, graced the church with her poise and unwavering support, embodying the image of a perfect union. Together, they were the golden couple, an example of faith and family, admired and envied in equal measure. But behind the pulpit, beneath the tailored suits and the radiant smiles, lurked a shadow, a web of secrets that would soon unravel, exposing a scandal that would shatter everything. Years earlier, Pastor Elijah had crossed a line that would haunt him forever. It began innocently enough. A troubled young woman named Vanessa Carter sought counsel from her trusted pastor. She was a striking beauty with fiery auburn hair and eyes that held both pain and defiance. Vanessa had a past riddled with poor choices, broken relationships, and fleeting moments of hope. She came to Kingdom of Light Ministries seeking redemption, craving a new beginning. Pastor Elijah had welcomed her with open arms, offering guidance and prayer. Their counseling sessions started formally, scriptures, advice, and encouragement. But soon, the boundaries blurred. Their conversations grew personal, their laughter lingered a little longer, and their eyes locked with an intensity that neither could ignore. Phone calls stretched late into the night under the pretense of spiritual support, but both knew it was becoming something more. One evening, the tension snapped. What began as a comforting embrace turned into a passionate affair. For months, they lived a dangerous double life. Vanessa became intoxicated with the idea of being loved by a man of power, while Elijah wrestled with guilt but found himself unable to sever their connection. Each stolen moment was laced with both ecstasy and dread. He preached about righteousness by day and indulged in unrighteousness by night. But the facade began to crumble when Vanessa missed her period. The test confirmed her fears: she was pregnant. Her initial shock quickly morphed into excitement. She envisioned a future where Elijah would leave his wife, and they would start a new life together. But Elijah's reaction was far from what she had hoped for. He was terrified, pale, trembling, and desperate. He pleaded with her to terminate the pregnancy, promising financial support but insisting his marriage and ministry could not withstand the scandal. Vanessa felt betrayed and disposable. Rage bubbled beneath her disappointment. She agreed to stay silent, but her heart burned with resentment. Weeks turned into months, and her silence became a weapon. She made subtle threats, hinting at revealing the truth whenever Elijah distanced himself. The once fiery passion between them turned into a volatile dance of manipulation and fear. Elijah's sermons grew heavier, his eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Deborah noticed his restlessness, the sudden tension in his jaw, and the furtive glances at his phone. Whispers began circulating within the church, hushed voices speculating about the pastor's recent unease. Then came the day that shattered everything. Vanessa appeared at a Sunday service, her pregnancy now unmistakable beneath her fitted dress. She positioned herself in the front row, locking eyes with Elijah as he stepped onto the pulpit. His voice faltered. Sweat trickled down his temple, every word felt like a lie in front of the congregation he had led with such authority. After the service, Vanessa cornered him. She was done with secrets. She demanded acknowledgement, a place in his life, or she would expose everything. Her voice was sharp, laced with bitterness. Elijah's heart pounded in his chest. He knew the walls were closing in. The carefully constructed facade of his perfect life was crumbling before his eyes. For some time Vanessa never called nor show up at the church. Pastor Elijah felt a little bit at peace, but that peace did not last for long. Vanessa Carter's labor was long and grueling, but when she held her newborn son in her arms for the first time, the pain melted into overwhelming love. She named him Elijah Jr., a silent tribute to the man she had once adored. As she gazed into his innocent eyes, she believed this child would change everything. She imagined Pastor Elijah Matthews holding their son, his heart softening at the sight of the boy who bore his name. She dreamed of their fractured relationship mending, of a future where her son would be embraced, not hidden. But reality struck like a thunderclap. When Vanessa informed Pastor Elijah of the birth, his voice was cold, distant. He congratulated her with forced politeness but made it clear that there would be no public acknowledgement, no fatherly visits, and no family portrait. He would continue sending money discreetly, but their affair and the child it produced would remain buried in the shadows. Vanessa's heart shattered. She had hoped for redemption, but she was met with rejection. Each month, the money arrived, crisp bills in an envelope, a cruel reminder that Elijah Jr. was nothing more than a transaction to his father. Vanessa felt discarded, a dirty secret swept under the rug while Pastor Elijah stood before his congregation every Sunday, preaching about righteousness and family values. Her resentment festered. She attended service with Elijah Jr., sitting in the back pew, watching the pastor deliver sermons with passion and conviction. Her stomach twisted as the congregation hung on his every word, oblivious to the hypocrisy standing before them. Each smile he gave his wife, Deborah, each tender word about faith and integrity, drove another dagger into Vanessa's heart. Desperate, Vanessa sought dialogue. She waited outside the church, cornering him in the parking lot after evening services. With their son bundled in her arms, she pleaded, tears streaking her cheeks. "Elijah, please. Look at him. He's yours and he deserves to know his father." Pastor Elijah glanced at the child but quickly averted his eyes. His voice was tense, his gaze darting around to ensure no one was watching. "I told you, Vanessa. I can't risk my family and my ministry, just take the money and move on." The words stung like poison. Vanessa realized he wasn't just protecting his reputation but he was erasing them, her son, her love, their history is reduced to nothing. Months passed, but Vanessa's anger burned hotter with each rejection. Her once tearful pleas morphed into venomous accusations. Phone calls turned into threats. "You preach about truth, Elijah. What about your truth? Our son's truth? How long do you think you can hide this?" Pastor Elijah's responses grew colder. He began ignoring her entirely. Vanessa found herself spiraling into obsession. She scoured his social media, studied his wife's smiling photos, and watched every sermon, memorizing his words. The life she had been denied taunted her daily. One evening, after another unanswered call, Vanessa stood over Elijah Jr.'s crib. He slept peacefully, his tiny chest rising and falling. She stroked his soft cheek and whispered, "You deserve better. You deserve a father who loves you." Tears welled up, but this time, they were not from sorrow. They were from rage. She was no longer the broken woman yearning for love. She was a mother seeking justice for her son. And in her mind, justice would come in blood. Vanessa began plotting. She knew Elijah's routine, his morning prayers at the church office, his late-night phone calls to board members. She knew Deborah's charity schedule, the weekly grocery trips. Vanessa's mind sharpened with purpose. Her days were spent planning, rehearsing scenarios, visualizing every possible outcome. Her first move was subtle. She started showing up at the church more frequently, sitting in different spots, sometimes with Elijah Jr., other times alone. Her eyes never left the pastor. Her presence was a reminder, a ghost lurking in the corners of his perfect life. Next came the letters, handwritten, with no return address, slipped under his office door. Messages laced with veiled threats. A man of God should not forsake his own blood. The truth always comes to light. Pastor Elijah grew uneasy. His sermons became strained, his once booming voice cracked with tension. Deborah noticed his distracted behavior, the late nights spent pacing the living room. One night, Vanessa escalated her campaign. She followed him home, parking across the street. From her car, she watched their home, Deborah setting the table, Elijah laughing with their children. Her fingers tightened around the steering wheel. That was the life she and her son had been denied. The final push came on a stormy Friday night. Vanessa cornered Pastor Elijah in the church parking lot once again. This time, there was no pleading. "You will acknowledge your son. Or I will make sure everyone knows what kind of man you truly are." Elijah's eyes burned with desperation. He stepped closer, his voice a furious whisper. "You don't understand what you're doing. You'll ruin everything." Vanessa's lips curled into a bitter smile. "You already ruined everything. Now, it's my turn." The storm raged around them, thunder echoing like a warning. Elijah drove off, his knuckles white on the steering wheel. He knew Vanessa meant every word. And he knew that his carefully constructed world was about to crumble. Vanessa returned home, cradling Elijah Jr. in her arms. She kissed his forehead and whispered, "He'll never ignore us again." But she had no idea that her pursuit of justice would soon spiral into a nightmarish chain of events, one that would end in bloodshed and tragedy. The countdown to devastation had begun. It was a bright Sunday morning, the grand 10th anniversary celebration of Kingdom of Light Ministries. The air was thick with excitement and reverence. The church had never looked more radiant, with gold and white ribbons adorned the pews, and fresh lilies lined the altar. The choir, dressed in matching robes, sang with heavenly passion, their voices weaving together in a harmony that seemed to touch the very heavens. Worshippers filled every seat, dressed in their finest attire, smiles bright, and hearts full of praise. Pastor Elijah Matthews stood behind the pulpit, his eyes sweeping over his congregation like a proud shepherd. He wore a tailored navy suit, his golden tie catching the sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows. Beside him, his wife, Deborah, sat in the front row, her face beaming with pride and adoration. She clutched his hand before he stepped onto the stage, a silent gesture of support. What would you do if someone you trusted betrayed you in the worst way possible? Would you forgive or seek revenge? But at the back of the church, beyond the sea of joyful faces, sat Vanessa Carter. Her heart pounded so fiercely she feared others might hear it. Beneath her elegant coat, her trembling hand rested on the cold grip of a loaded .45 caliber handgun. Every detail of this moment had played out in her mind for weeks. She had rehearsed it countless times, what she would say, how his face would twist in shock, and how justice would finally be served. Her eyes burned as she watched Elijah preach. His voice was smooth, confident and hypocritical. The same man who rejected his own son now spoke of God's love and forgiveness. Vanessa's knuckles whitened as she gripped the pew in front of her. The lies, the deceit, her son, Elijah Jr., would not grow up in the shadows. As Pastor Elijah lifted his hands to begin his sermon, Vanessa's body acted before her mind could second-guess. She stood abruptly. The wooden pew creaked beneath her, heads turned, eyes narrowing in confusion. Whispers fluttered through the crowd. Deborah noticed the movement and glanced back, her brow furrowed. Vanessa's heels clicked against the polished marble floor as she strode forward. Her face, once radiant with hope, was now twisted with pain and fury. With every step, the memories surged, Elijah's promises, his cold rejection, her son's innocent face asking about his father. Elijah. Her voice sliced through the sanctuary like a blade. Gasps rippled through the congregation. Pastor Elijah froze, his eyes widening in disbelief. He knew that voice. Deborah turned fully now, confusion giving way to dread. She recognized Vanessa, the woman whose presence had grown increasingly bold over the past year. Vanessa stood at the center of the aisle, her chest heaving. "Elijah Matthews, you will not ignore me today." Her voice cracked with emotion. Murmurs escalated into a chorus of concern. Ushers hesitated, unsure whether to intervene. Some worshippers rose, while others clutched their children, sensing something was terribly wrong. Elijah took a step forward, his mouth slightly open, but words failed him. Sweat beaded on his brow. He knew what was coming. Vanessa reached into her coat. The sharp motion caused gasps and panicked cries. "Vanessa, wait." Elijah raised his hands, his voice strained with fear. But it was too late. She drew the gun, the metallic glint catching the light. Screams erupted. Deborah shot to her feet, shielding her children. "You lied to me. You lied to everyone." Vanessa shouted, tears streaming down her face, her hand shook, the barrel of the gun aimed directly at Elijah's chest. "He is your son," she shrieked. "Elijah Jr. is your son. And you cast him aside like nothing." The sanctuary descended into chaos. Some members scrambled for the exits, others cowered behind pews. The choir huddled together, their hymn books clutched like shields. Elijah stepped off the pulpit slowly, his hands trembling. "Vanessa, please, not here. We can talk, just put the gun down." But Vanessa was beyond reason. Her voice cracked with the weight of betrayal. "You preached about love while you abandoned your own child. I begged you. I loved you." Tears blurred her vision. Her grip tightened. Deborah, tears streaming down her face, pleaded from the front row. "Please, think of your son. He needs his mother, don't do this." The mention of Elijah Jr. made Vanessa falter. Her breath hitched. Her hand trembled more violently. Elijah seized the hesitation and lunged forward. A deafening gunshot cracked through the church. The stained glass windows seemed to rattle in protest. A choir member screamed. Deborah collapsed into sobs. Elijah staggered back, clutching his side. Blood bloomed through his pristine suit. He collapsed to his knees, gasping for air. Vanessa stood frozen, the gun falling from her hand. Her chest heaved, her face pale with shock. She hadn't meant to pull the trigger. Or had she? Ushers tackled her to the ground. The gun skidded across the marble, police sirens wailed in the distance. Elijah lay on the stage, his life slipping away beneath the very pulpit where he had preached salvation. His eyes met Vanessa's one last time, a silent exchange of regret, anger, and sorrow. The congregation wept. Deborah clutched her children, shielding their eyes from the horror. And as Vanessa was led away in handcuffs, her mind raced back to the boy she had done it all for. Elijah Jr. would grow up without a father. And now, without a mother. Justice, she had thought, but at what cost? Elijah gasped, pain etched across his face, physical and emotional. He mouthed something, but the words were too faint, drowned out by the panic around him. The church was no longer a sanctuary. It had become a crime scene. The holy ground now bore the stain of vengeance. Elijah lay still, his breathing shallow. Deborah cradled him, tears staining his blood-soaked robe. She looked up as paramedics burst in, her face pleading for a miracle. But some wounds cut deeper than flesh. Some wounds leave scars that no prayer can heal. As Pastor Elijah took his last breath, his blood staining the sacred altar, Deborah let out a wail so piercing it sent shivers down the spine of every witness. Vanessa was dragged away in handcuffs, her face emotionless. "At least now, my son won't have to live in the shadows," she murmured as they shoved her into the police car. The congregation was left in shock. The man they revered, the leader they idolized, had died at the hands of his own sins. His legacy lay in ruins, his betrayal exposed for all to see. The tragedy of it all was that Elijah Jr. would never know his father, only the scandal that surrounded his name. As the church bells rang in the distance, marking the end of service, Kingdom of Light Ministries would never be the same again, and neither would the people who had witnessed the fall of their beloved pastor. This tale is a harrowing reminder that even the most revered can fall, and beneath the surface of every perfect life, secrets may lurk waiting to destroy everything, and a chilling reminder of how secrets, betrayal, and revenge can destroy lives. If you found this story intriguing, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Crime Chronicles for more shocking true crime stories. See you in the next one.